previous.
Before you start this is what I want you to talk to you about, and I've written this down. I want to talk to you about the Museum of Ice Creamification. But this is our thing, right?
Yeah.
And this is only
It's
stuff.
happening.
This is
It's
only
happening.
stuff that I write down when we're on the phone that I want to go into more with you. But what I wanted to ask you was about this concept, the Museum of Ice Creamification of art institutions, how they have become adult daycare centers, and the loss of gatekeeping in art institutions being a bad thing in general, how alternative institutions need to be subsidized to recreate a culture that is defined by creation rather than consumption. And AI and ClearNet platforms being anti-creation and pro-consumption. So explain to my audience the Museum of Ice Creamification of art institutions.
Well, okay, so if you're a young creative, you have probably grown up with this idea that what we need to do as like progressives, very broadly speaking, is we have to overthrow the corrupt institutions.
That's right.
That like that's the man, that's what you should be fighting against and whatever. And I would say that there's a conflict right now amongst the ruling class about how they prefer to organize society. Some people like to be patrons, but others do not. And so in the period that both you and I grew up, one of the things that was offered to young creatives was a platform in which anyone can post. There's no editors, there's no curators, there's no gatekeepers. You can bypass any opinion and just post what you want to the platforms. Those people, this is very curious and pronounced in the art world, they never donated to museums. Unlike the Carnegies, unlike the Fricks, unlike all of the robber barons of the 20th century that, you know, pillaged society but then gave back in the form of these extraordinary libraries and museums and public institutions like the opera, for example. The new 21st century Silicon Valley robber barons have not chosen to give back to culture. And that's actually a very unique thing in the development of capitalism, because usually when people take a lot off of the table, they give something back in some way. I think that's an ideological decision, because what they would say is that we actually built all of the platforms in which you can upload all of your thoughts to YouTube, you can post them to Twitter or whatever, and so now everybody is an artist, and we gave you the means to do that, to publish and so on. So
and everybody's an activist.
And well, that is naturally one of the results. So I like to take this kind of contrarian position in that what we are seeing is actually an erosion of the public sphere, and of public goods through this competing structure of the platform.
Yes.
And so I think actually the logic that we were raised with to rebel against the institutions is kind of pretty outmoded by like 20 years.
Yes,
right?
it is.
These are relatively new phenomena, like the mass adoption curve of Facebook is like 2012. So, I mean, the way in which the academy catches up to these things, we're still a few decades away. Like, we're still learning this kind of Foucault boomer, like rebel against the institutions, whatever. But like the institutions are more weak than they've ever been. They were actually thoroughly defeated. Okay. And so I'm a big proponent of not using the platforms as our desired alternatives. I think we need to build new institutions.
Exactly.
I'm not saying the existing ones are savable. I think that the task of our generation, of people like you and me, is to build new institutions, new trustworthy institutions. Because the platforms are turning everything into the fucking museum of ice cream, where everything is content for ad views and so on.
If you look at the new Van Gogh experience, which is an institutional art, it's an art institution, saying, come and see our art show. They are not actually expecting people to come and revel in the aesthetic delights of projectors. What they want you to do is come and create content that becomes advertisement for the institution itself. Right. Same with the Museum of Ice Cream. They are no longer art institutions. They are essentially adverts for the concept of an art institution or the art institution itself, which is why you'll go to a gallery and you'll walk in and you'll go, the Cause times Rick and Morty experience. And you'll have some art speak. But what it's actually
I could actually see that happening.
Right? What it's actually for is for
it's a Brad post next week, and it's a real thing 2 weeks later.
This is the whole thing. One of the things, let's start with that idea of the ice creamification of art institutions. Now, it's not just art institutions, but it's big media corporations. So take whatever example of a huge artist or a concept like Marvel. The most again, Trammell will talk about this, the most enduring product that has been created by those companies is the consumer identity of the people who are into it.
Right.
So what Marvel or other artists have realized over the past 15 years with social media and people's kind of projection of who they are, and is that being a fan of something is now a form of political identity. So when I grew up, when I grew up, if you were a super fan of something, if you went over to someone's house and they were a super fan of something, before you went in their bedroom, they would go, listen, I'm not fucking weird. Right? just don't judge me.
Are you thinking of like a specific person right now?
Yeah, there's a couple of people who whether it be like Oasis or and you'd walk in and their room was a shrine to this thing.
It's just everywhere.
And the relationship was, I don't know how the camera can pick me up, but say there's a poster on your wall. Your relationship was looking at this poster. Your relationship with fandom now is going like this to the poster, like showing other people who you are through your kind of fandom. And you therefore become essentially a part of the promotional labor force of the company itself.
I mean, this is practically speaking, it's called user-generated content. It's built into advertising campaigns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
how
for
many
example,
people you can get to spread the post and share it and engagement and so on.
I don't like doing that because I think it's very, very contrived. So I try and stay away from that in the 1975 sphere. And so that's one of the interesting things, and about that kind of art institutional problem. Art and aesthetics is how we compute and understand time. And when that dissolves, the depressive flattening of culture is what Fisher talks about